right, we're going to have to play around with the audio here a little bit. I know we've got a number of people online. And Chase, where will messages come up? Because I really maybe want to ask them how the audio is. And it says I got a slash across it.
So
no, it doesn't.
No, that's to cancel it. So click here.
Okay.
And so that's
where it'll come up.
Yep.
Okay.
So this is, you see your screen, and there's a little slight
Do
delay
you
on
want to
there.
check in the other room and see about the audio? All right. Well, we will assume we're all right. Why don't a couple of you that kind of know what you're doing, because I don't, why don't you send me a text if you can hear it and see this all right? And we'll get a little more professional then, because if you're not hearing or seeing me, we need to do something. Oh, good. Audio's good. All right, good. Welcome to the private video stream for Armed Alabama. And this is, wasn't sure how this was going to go, so we will, we're experimenting here, and it's looking pretty good. The way you text, I'll get the message over here. And if you have a question, fine, send it in. Have a comment, fine, send it in. If you want to just listen, that is perfectly okay too. We're going to try to do these every 2 weeks as a supplement to our supporters of the show. Want to just briefly tell you about some of the news the past week or so, and then we'll get into anything that y'all might want to talk about. One thing that has happened in the news is the Alabama legislature, and I mentioned this on the show, but if you didn't get to see it, the Alabama legislature in the House let the constitutional carry bill, that's what we'll call it, the bill that made provisions that you didn't need a permit to carry a concealed weapon or concealed firearm, that died in the Alabama House. And the Alabama House has traditionally been the place where firearms legislation has gone to die or has been killed. They never really kill it because that would require a vote. This way, it just never gets out of the appropriate committee. Last year, the same thing happened with the bill that lifted the requirements of having to have a permit to carry your loaded firearm in the car with you. It also died in the House. And that's really kind of amazing because Alabama is probably one of the most pro-firearm states in the nation. I think it's fine if people aren't required to have a permit as long as the state keeps offering permits, because permits, as I always say, they're your passport to 37 other states, I think the number is, that have reciprocal agreements with the state of Alabama. You can take that and go to those other states, and your permit from Alabama is recognized. That's not always as easy as you might think. I'll tell you my experience from going to New Orleans. Their laws, like a lot of states, are so complicated, and you have to abide by the law of that state. Number one, it's, you can't carry into any establishment that sells alcohol. I think Louisiana, as I recall, it is any alcohol, but it may be one of those 50%, more than 50%, which a lot of states are. Well, when you're going out, and a lot of times you're going out and planning on having a few drinks, that's the time you're in most danger. And I would assume, like I tell people, if you're going out carrying, don't get drunk. Louisiana actually has a law that says you can drink up to the limit that you're presumed driving under the influence, 0.08, and that's fine to carry. But so under the law, you couldn't go to a place that sells alcohol, more than 50% alcohol in Louisiana, and have a couple of drinks over the course of a good meal, stay at 0.03, let's say, and you'd be in violation of the law. It's just confusing, and it's wrong to put that on everybody. So anyway, that bill, our bill, died, and if you did go the constitutional carry route, you'd have to stay in the state of Alabama. And that, if you're going to stay in the state of Alabama, that's fine. Another perk that you would lose also is the state accepts, it's up to the firearm dealer, the federal firearms dealer, but a lot of them will accept your concealed carry permit as evidence that you have you've been cleared and that you can buy a firearm. They don't have to, in other words, call in to the instant background check, the NICSA instant background check. Most of the time, that's no problem. But I'll give you for instance, because it's kind of funny. They were clearing me, and it was one that I had shipped in. It was an old gun, and I could tell the person had a voice where it could have been male, could have been female, who knows. And but I knew that it was a male. And the guy calling in the check kept calling the person ma'am. Well, I don't know where this is, but I presume he was insulting this person every time he said ma'am. Well, I got put on hold about 30 minutes before mine was approved. So that was the punishment for doing that. So wouldn't have that problem now. The card, the permit would clear it. So that's pretty good. Other than that, there are little things. The Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals has said if you are carrying a firearm illegally without a permit, they basically said the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply. That's insane, because the Fourth Amendment applies if you're carrying heroin and you're subjected to an illegal search. I can't imagine how they came up with that. And it's just another reason why the federal courts their jurisdiction need to be scaled way back, because they have literally taken over every aspect of our lives. Chase, why don't we do this? When we get a question, why don't you read it out to me? Because
who's the young man on the poster?
Right now, to hear its question.
On the posters, actually, now there you go. So you're playing, that is a young lady, and she's a police officer, and she is part of a good guy, bad guy shooting scenario where you really want to go all out. You put good guy right next to her, a guy with a gun. Then a guy is a little bit, maybe has his hand down on a cell phone. How about that? And there we go. On a cell phone. And, that's where you really understand what a police officer's up to when you get all that, and then throw a little darkness on it. But I've got a whole series of those, and I like to have myself and students shoot at targets that look like human beings, because it's a little thing, but you need to get used to staring at a human. If you're going to kill somebody, and you're justified, of course, hopefully, you need to get used to the shape of the human body. But looking at those eyes, if you're going to kill somebody, you don't need to have a lot of sympathy in your heart, your mind for them. That's one thing I had to learn as a judge pretty quick. By the time I saw somebody who maybe had brutally murdered, a little old lady, they were all cleaned up like they had just come from choir practice. So I told the district attorney, I said, I want to see their victims. I don't want to just see somebody whose lawyers had them dress up and rehearsed them about how to be nice and respectful to the judge. I want the victim to tell me what happened and how horrible it was, so I can get angry. And about the next week, that's what happened. So it got any kind of sympathy I might have out of me. Unfortunately, we've got way too many judges that have way too much sympathy, because these never get in the paper. if anybody reads the paper, the AL.com, or especially they don't get on the television news, but there are a lot of really heinous crimes. I mean, sadistic crimes that take place. And I think they're not reported on for the stupid reason that they think it'll hurt people moving to town, moving to the area. They happen in every city, so I don't know why it matters. But, you know, I'll tell you one in particular. This isn't very bad, so you don't have to close your ears. I had a, you know, they're a pretty old couple. Hopefully they're not dead. But they lived, let's say, in Midtown. Either one or both had survived a concentration camp during the Holocaust. And, you know, that in itself is a pretty harrowing experience. Their house, they went to the door, you know, these people knock on the door and want all kind of things. 9 times out of 10, most of us will go to the door. Oh, can I help you? Well, wham, the door's kicked in. And during the course of a pretty violent robbery, you know, both of them have broken bones, cuts. They're not killed, but they're darn near killed. That's going to be life-threatening for anybody and traumatic. And they were well into their 80s. You didn't, if you read about it, it was because I used it as an example when I was on a forum, only one, by the way, urging the legislature to build more prisons and not start releasing prisoners under some new policy they had thought up. You know, I'll get off on that in a minute. A term has been invented that y'all need to be aware of called mass incarceration. You know, that sounds like something horrible. All it is we have finally contained kind of the criminal class, most of them, a lot of them. That's the reason the crime rate is actually, we can't ever say it's an all-time low because it's like temperature. It didn't start taking readings in really about 1900, but it is at a pretty good low. Now that we have it at a pretty good low, there are all these, first of all, you have a group of conservatives that want to save money, and then of course a group of your liberals that don't think anybody ought to be punished for anything, that think we ought to just open the doors and let everybody go now. Well, the sentencing, locking everybody up, has worked. Crime's down. You know, why change? This is victory. There's something called the economic or societal cost of crime. Each burglary cost around $17,000. Now you may say, you know, I only had $1,000 stolen. Well, you also had your front door busted in that you had to repair. Everybody's insurance rates went up, even though they only paid you $500, the insurance company raised the rates for everybody. The police showed up to take the report. If the guy was arrested, he was prosecuted. So it ripples through society. Most burglars commit 50 to 100 burglaries a year. So do the numbers. It's much cheaper to leave someone like that in the penitentiary than to have them out committing more burglaries. Economic cost of a murder is $3.5 million. So these people that think that reducing prison cost saves money are out of their minds. It may save budget money, but that's our money. So the number one goal of the government is personal protection. That's why we have to carry, or if you don't carry a gun, carry some type of self-defense weapon, because that is not the job of the government. They undertake it, but it's not their legal responsibility to defend us. And if they fail to show up after you've called them, you can't sue them. There are plenty of cases that say that. How we doing, Chase? Chase is my not just computer guy. He is the I guess social media advisor, we'll call him. So a couple of things I wanted to show you all. A few weeks ago, I had mentioned on the show that first, the safest thing you can do at your house first is lock all the doors and windows. People jump first to alarms. Hey, it's great if you can eventually afford an alarm, but lock your doors and windows first. We had a bad string of forcible rapes that took place maybe 10 years ago by a guy named Johnny Moffett, who was dubbed the West Side Rapist or something like that. Unfortunately, I was the judge that had to try him. I say unfortunately because that's upsetting to me to have to try something like that. In every case, he came through an unlocked door or an unlocked window. Not the fault of the victims. They ought to be able to leave the door open. But unfortunately, they are just lunatic thugs like that who will take advantage of that. So lock the door or window first. Next, I mentioned this on the show the other night, every set of hinges comes with usually 1.5-inch screws. Take them out and put in 2.5, 3.5-inch screws. Take the old screw to the hardware store and get heavier screws. You can also get screws that have a thicker shaft. That will make your door so much more solid. A lot of people have wised up and they've gotten, of course, the deadbolts. That's great. But if you got hinges, even though they may be nice hinges, if you've got hinges that just have 1.5-inch screws anchoring them to the door, they can be kicked in real easy. And the first point of entry, if your door is isn't unlocked, it's locked up, is just a foot to the front door. And most of the time they'll just come popping right in. Next place is the back door. If you can get those secured through good locks and good hinges with long screws, they'll usually move on because criminals are lazy and they're stupid. And there are very few of them that are going to find a ladder and climb up to your second floor. In fact, that is rarer than, a meteorite hitting you on the head if you went to the Alabama-Auburn game. It's just not going to happen. You want to prepare for that, but in all likelihood, it will never happen. So, do that kind of thing. The other thing is if you have an accessible backyard and you have a fence around it, make sure you can lock it up, because you'd rather not have somebody be able to go in your backyard and operate back there in secret while he tries to get in your garage or your back door or something. If you've got swinging gates, don't trust an ordinary chain. Two ways to do it if you want to. We get it on camera. This is the type chain I'm showing you now that you pull a log through the woods with, a timber chain, and it'll hold, it's tempered. I think it'll pull 25,000 pounds. It's really expensive. I think 40 feet of this is maybe $75, $80, but 2 feet of it isn't. So and chains are handy because, you can put your padlock through it, opening the link. I think better than a chain is, we talked about this on one of the shows, is most people call it cable. I think the industry, they usually term wire rope. At least 1/4-inch wire rope. And I got one put together, but it didn't seem to make it over here. But they have them put together for you, but I make them of different sizes. You can get a crimping tool like I've got over here. But they make 6-foot ones, all the stores that sell hardware device, and they loop around like that. That can't be cut with a bolt cutter. A bolt cutter you can get for $29, maybe $19. It won't cut that chain, but I suspect the $49 bolt cutter would, or perhaps a reciprocating saw. You got to get about $129 tool to cut this, and criminals just don't have those. yeah, they can get through that, but you have a 2 or 3 foot section, put this around your gate with a good strong padlock like that. And it's going to be difficult to get through there. Very difficult. And that's what you're trying to do. I've got the purchase price was $7,000. What is it worth now? Probably $2,500, but it still runs, still works well. Kawasaki Mule that's about 10 years old, up in the country in Mississippi. Now I've got one of those cables like I just showed you, thicker than that, with a padlock like that, and it's looped through the frame of the Mule. I mean, nobody's going to be able to get through that. Of course, it doesn't have the key in it and all that. And it also has a tendency to build up a family of mice in it. So whoever starts it, if they do cut all that, they're going to have mice run out on them. You got to kind of bang on it first, and the mice will disperse, and then you can get in there. But use those simple things, because criminals aren't smart, and they don't like a lot of noise. The interesting thing is, it's a real controversy about lighting. If you get no light, sometimes they can't see, and you're safe. You get some type of light, you give them just enough so they can work on a lock and cut through it. They've done studies that say all of these lights that the power companies pushed that ruined their night sky actually have increased crime, because the criminals can see what they're doing, see where the victims are. So you got to be smart about lighting. You don't want to drive up and get out in the dead night, dead dark, and have maybe a shadow and be attacked by somebody hiding behind a big hedge. So you got to be smart about it, and just think it through. There are a lot of places that can give you that information about lighting.
Dennis commented, he said, it seems the system is broke. Cops arrest career criminals, but there's no teeth in the courts and state. Because the system does not protect the populace, we are left to protect our families. To those elderly seem to be left to a failing system. Is there any hope to turn the tide?
I don't think so. I think that when you live in a society like ours, where you have air conditioning, where you have 150 channels on television, you don't know your neighbor anymore, I think the luxury makes everybody weak, and we don't care anymore. As long as it doesn't happen to me. I'm just shy of 60, let's put it that way. And I still remember when murders took place in Mobile, when a murder took place, everybody knew about it. It was shocking. As a judge, I'd find out another judge was trying a capital murder case, and I would have never even heard about the crime when it took place. That's amazing. And the federal courts, here we go. We can't get anybody put to death. The federal courts, the Constitution only set up the Supreme Court, authorized Congress to set up such inferior courts as are necessary. Well, of course, bureaucracies grow, to the limit that you set for them. So they set up the Circuit Court of Appeals and the district courts, and then they gave them the jurisdiction to hear habeas corpus cases and all capital murder cases from the states. So after the state of Alabama finishes trying a case, which usually lasts 2 to 3, 4 weeks, and they go through the appeals in the state system, then in effect, they automatically get to go through a set of appeals with the federal court system, where they get to second guess everything we've done. And that's not set up by the Constitution. It's something Congress has given them the jurisdiction to do. I think it's because we're so skittish about putting someone to death, because the media keeps working on us about all these innocent people that have been put to death. That's not true. Most of the people they claim are innocent Of course, nobody's ever held to be innocent. It's not guilty. And it's, well, he shouldn't have been put to death because he was mentally incompetent or because he couldn't speak English. It's not that he didn't do the act. Anytime you hear about those, ask yourself or find out, did the person charged do the act itself? Did they kill the victim? Now, you can kill the victim and for various legal circumstances not be guilty of the crime, but find out if they actually did the act. And most of the time you'll find out they did, but we'll change the whole law that we've operated by for hundreds of years because 7 people they claim were innocent were put to death, and every one of them has a felony record as long as your arm anyway. It's not like we've put together the pastor of the local church. But yeah, to answer his question, I don't think we have enough guts to do what we need to do. You know,
inside the home we can use our.
Oh yeah. Well, let me tell you. Here's a piece of legislation I'm going to propose because I hadn't really broadcast this because the legislation we have in this state, some states are horrible. Ours is medium. Our legislation requires that if someone enters your home, that's called a burglary. If they enter your home in order to commit a felony, that means a theft. That is a burglary. But that you also have to be reasonably afraid, reasonably in imminent fear that they're going to commit a physical assault upon you, or physical violence upon you, not deadly physical force, just physical force. That needs to be removed. I've already got it written. And we need to flip it around and say anyone who attempts to enter or enters your home is presumed that they're going to commit violence upon the occupants, and anyone in that dwelling, home, or business has the right to use deadly physical force. That's end of subject. I've even gotten it written so you can't be arrested if you do not give a statement that night. You can't be arrested. You can be interviewed 72 hours later. That's just what the police, most of the police unions or associations, they have a deal like that with the cities they work for, because we know scientifically that the brain can't process everything that's happened with all of that adrenaline inside you. So I've got it written like that. And then if you happen to be charged, I've got a lot of where the burden of proof shifts even further, and you're found not guilty, the local district attorney who charged you is responsible for up to $10,000 of your attorney's fees. Now, like I say, we're in good shape in this circuit and a lot of circuits, but that's just because kind of prevailing attitudes. I'd rather have it written into the law because, people change offices and attitudes change, and I don't want to rely on the good graces whoever is in office at any particular time. You shouldn't have to be concerned about, the problem is it makes you lie. If I wasn't particularly concerned, if the burglar was just in my house, and he looks dangerous, but, he's not running at me with a broom handle or something. And I don't say that. And I don't want to be concerned about being in Jefferson County and get charged by the DA up there with murder. So that's one of the things that needs to be changed.
So here's another question. When is it reasonable to fear for your life if you are stuck in an unlawful traffic block/protest? And when are you justified in driving through the protesters or rioters?
You're the one that determines whether or not you're in fear for your life. It's not the people that are sitting in the courtroom that determine whether or not you were correct. Now, they can determine whether you were just so unreasonable that no one else would do that. Now, let's give you a perfect example. You're stopped for 6 people with down with the mayor because of the new sales tax. and they're crossing at the crosswalk, and there's one in a walker, he's going slow, and you're crossed in. If you just run them over, this protest is getting out of hand, and you run them over. I think most people are going to say, that's not reasonable. But if there are 8,000, or let's say 800 people, and they're banging on your windows, that's reasonable.
Yeah, like what we've seen in the past, some of them like move onto the interstate, and you've got that
yeah.
line of people on the interstate. What would you do there? What can
personally, I would run over them. You can use your car as a deadly weapon, just like you can use a pistol. Does anybody remember in the Los Angeles riots, the guy's last name was Denny? I'm going to say Reginald Denny, but it may not be. Who was pulled at?
It's Reginald Denny, because that's the last question: is what could Reginald Denny have done?
Run over him, and he should have. But there's that momentary hesitation, empathy, sympathy that non-criminals, we all have it. That distinguishes us from the criminal, that we don't want to kill, and that's what gets you killed.
That's why you shoot at the human target, right?
That's right. Just to try to emphasize, you got to work through that. But that's why people get killed, and that's that quarter-second hesitation that may get you killed. But now you've got the right to use that car, and that's one of the decisions you've got to make. Let's say you've got a gun in your car that holds 12 rounds, 14 rounds, but you've got 40 or 50 people that have surrounded your car and they're rocking it. You should be in imminent fear for your life. That's the point that if I was sitting in your shoes, I'd hit the gas. If you've driven properly, you don't need what you need to do. And I've mentioned this on the show before, but it bears repeating. You need to do travel motorcade style. You don't need to be bumper to bumper. You need to have enough room ahead of you and offset from the car in front of you to where you can always get out. Otherwise, you're hemmed in. And that's where they run motorcades, and that's the way you ought to drive. In other words, don't be right behind the other car. I'm trying to vertically and horizontally, and give yourself, if you do a car length, there'll be somebody that gets in there, but three-quarters of a car length. But if you're offset about a third of the width of the car, you can also swing the car out. The only thing you got to contend with is people that are caught up in let's call it a riot, that aren't necessarily rioters, that are being swept along. Let's say, the lady in with her baby carriage. But you're still justified if they're involved in that, because they could get hit with a bullet just as easily. But if you've got a limited amount of ammunition, you're just not going to be able to use it if you bail out like that. And if you've got children with you, you're not going to be able to bail out of that car. That glass is a lot stronger than you think it is. Has anybody ever broken left their keys in their car and had to break a side window, let's say? I had to purchase a hammer. I know which one's the cheapest. It's usually the back driver's side window. And I've had a hammer bounce off that window 2 or 3 times before it would break. And that's pretty strong. And try to break through your windshield. I mean, you're not going to do it without a small sledgehammer, and then it just cracks, mashes in a small hole. You won't get through that one. So they're pretty formidable. The steel doesn't do very good about blocking bullets, I'll tell you that. But if that's all you have, that's good. But
they're not making it for bullets; they're making it for car collisions.
Well, that's right. Yeah, which is worse than a bullet. But I tell you, it's amazing. I'll give you a side story. When I first started practicing law, the bread and butter I was a civil defense lawyer, was defending car accidents. And, we argued all the time contrary, but I mean, there are a lot of car accidents. And a lot of major injuries, but a lot of, broken legs and things like that. Upon leaving the bench 2 years ago, there are hardly any car accidents because the cars have gotten a lot safer. Some of y'all that are a little older remember all the steel that dashboards used to be made out of steel. And of course, I remember my father taking our car in to have seat belts put in when seat belts became available. And it wasn't an option then. He took them in aftermarket to have seat belts put in. So imagine flying forward and hitting a steel dashboard.
Well, I've heard since they've taken all that steel out, I've actually heard that low speed collisions are the most dangerous ones because they do the most damage to the people inside because the cars crumple at that high speed, high velocity, but the low speed,
you don't have all that.
Get jerked.
Yeah, exactly. So, and people's complaint now is, wow, I broke my nose on the airbag.
I'm sorry.
I had some horrible cases with some of the older. Now I had a few with some newer ones, but they were bad wrecks that people never would have lived. Had they been in a earlier car, even though the cars were real substantial, they didn't stop you from flying forward or they'd catch on fire. Some of y'all remember the case. I wish I could remember some of the survivors' names, but it was a crash out on Fire Tower Road, Halloween night. The young people had purchased illegally from a BP store a bunch of beer, and the car went off the road, crashed, caught on fire, and 2 people I know made it out, one brother and sister. One was burned so bad that he was in the hospital for 1 year. Now, there was a settlement with the BP, but lawsuit against General Motors. This shows you juries here are pretty conservative. It's called a crashworthiness case. You've got to prove that there was a better way to manufacture that car. And the claim was you could put in, and you probably could have, materials, carpet, both plastic and all. It wouldn't have caught on fire like it did. It's kind of questionable. Should it have made it to the jury or not? I let it go because it was a close call and I wanted them to have their day in court. The case took 3 weeks to try. And let me tell you, once again, the plaintiffs, people brought the suit, they look like Charles Woods, if y'all remember the old politician. No ears, melted off, fingers had been melted off. Jury deliberated about 6 hours, defense verdict. In other words, not guilty, no money. And that's pretty tough. I think it was correct, but that's a conservative jury. And you don't hear about those much in the press. And I talked to the reporter one time and I said, you really kind of give the state a bad rap because you publicize big verdicts that may later be cut down lower, and you don't publicize cases where they're defense verdicts or low verdicts. Well, that's not really news. So it is news. There was a case where the plaintiff's lawyer demanded $6 million and a jury came back with 1,000 or no verdict. That is news. So, the journalism business has been destroyed. Let's talk about home defense.
I've got one more question.
Okay, yeah.
Someone says, I've been visiting a friend at a local hospital and there are signs saying no weapons. Am I actually prohibited from carrying my EDC?
There's been no ruling on that. And let me tell you the origin. The 2013 Firearms Act has a provision in it that says that you're not allowed. Could I see if we can find out? Well, I'll know the answer. I'll just tell him. It says that you cannot carry a firearm into any hospital where people with emotional or mental disturbances are treated either inpatient or temporary, or I think it says temporarily. Well, the only hospital in Mobile, the county, that has any psychiatric beds, assuming they still do, is the Mobile Infirmary. It would apply there, although that their real intent was Taylor Hardin and the state hospitals, mental hospitals. But every hospital in this county, for a few hours and maybe a day until they can get a bed at a hospital, a real psychiatric hospital, is going to treat you. Maybe not properly, but they're going to treat you. That's the type of law that I just deep covered. I don't think you're going to get arrested. If you are arrested, as I recall, that statute doesn't even have a penalty provision attached to it. And is your life more important than that? And I wouldn't carry openly in there. I just go a little more deep cover because they obviously made a mistake. I know they did, because when they were discussing it, they talked about the places they wanted to keep firearms out of, and it was mental hospitals. And giving an example, Providence Hospital is not a mental hospital. But if you come in there thinking that you're having a certain kind of problem, let's say you're having ketoacidosis with diabetes, but you're really having some type of schizophrenia, they're going to hold you until they can find the appropriate place to put you. They're not going to say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have mental facilities available here, see you later. They're going to hold on to you for some amount of time until they can get you to a real hospital.
So what would you do if you were going to visit a friend or someone inside the hospital and you had your carry with you?
I would carry a little smaller pistol so I could hide it a little better. And I wouldn't show anybody in there.
You just play coy. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Oh, well, yeah, I certainly wouldn't tell it. I wouldn't tell anybody, number one.
They see it. If they see it,
well, if they see it and ask me to leave or put it in the car or leave, I would do that just because I wouldn't want to call. I don't want to be the test case, because that costs money and everything. But I just make sure they didn't see it. Do you see a book? Well, let me bend down to, you could get a book like this. I got it. Ordinary book. I would be studying my Alabama law while I was there and take it in. Maybe you can get one that looks like a Bible, and let's open it up. And I would have, is a good,
a few pages.
Yeah, this is a good size for a large 380 or smaller 9mm.
So you just conceal carry.
Yeah, I would just conceal it very well, and it's nobody's business. I don't normally answer people's questions. I mean, I can't. Let's say, for instance, a security officer comes up there into the building. Excuse me, sir. Have you got any marijuana in your pocket? I don't, but I'm not going to.
New laws from Stimson.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer him. Yeah, I'm going to say the mayor says they don't have to answer that question. That's what I'm going to say.
So it's not prohibited. They can.
I don't think it is. And if I were the judge on the case, which I'm not, I would say that statute is void for vagueness. That is a provision that is a way you can declare an act unconstitutional. It's void for vagueness.
And I've linked the handgunlaw.us.
Great.
You can go and
Great.
look for, if you have any follow-ups, please ask. If not,
yeah,
there's more information there.
That's one we need to clarify, by the way, because it's written poorly, which shouldn't be a shock. There are a lot of, if you go through the online version of the Alabama Code, which I've told you, go to Google, type in Code of Alabama 1975, that gives you the correct one, hit that, and then it'll take you to the page, and then go to 13A, that's the criminal code, and then it's the 13A is at Title 60 that has 13A dash, check it. Everywhere it's not just in that section, everywhere that it should have trial, it has trail. trail like a trail for a cow or a dog. Of course, we know a computer's going to see trails spelt correctly, but we know that you do have trials for people. You don't have trails for people. So that's it's just
Not
kind of
legal.
that's kind of one of the things to do. But are we up to date? I'll give you a house like this. You know, this is an older house built in the 50s, but an addition. If you're not going to carry, there's no reason to rely necessarily on a pistol in a house like this. A short carbine is easier to use. It's more accurate. It's less frightening, less noise. And what I mean by that, a carbine is generally a short rifle. And when I say carbine, I mean a classic would be an M1 carbine. And they're making new versions of those. That was a Korean War, World War II rifle or carbine. You can buy the older versions. They've gotten kind of way expensive now for about $1,000, depending on what they look like. But no need to do that unless you want to collect old guns. There are a couple of companies, Kahr Arms, KAHR, KRH Arms, Auto Ordnance is its other name. They make brand new version of that. And it's about, I think, $799 or something like that, $800. It's a nice gun. And for instance, my daughter is very frightened, like everybody is at first, of a AR-15 or any type of black gun like that. An M1 carbine is a wooden gun. It's pretty. It's semi-automatic. I even put a recoil pad on it. It's very little recoil. By the way, a 20 gauge shotgun has 10 times the recoil of an M1 carbine. That ought to kind of show you how soft it is. And people will say, well, the round it fires, which is I'm having total blank. It's the some carbine. I'll think of it in a second. They used to just manufacture it in a Full Metal Jacket, but then you could buy a hunting round for it, which was soft lead. But Hornady now makes it in basically their critical defense line, which is a self-defense round. You're getting the stopping power, not knockdown power, but stopping power of at least a 40 caliber and maybe, a 45, because you've got a 18 or 20 inch barrel on that. I think it's 18. So it's a short gun. And the thing I like about a short carbine in the house is you've got multiple points of contact. So you're not just holding on to semi-auto, because your hands are going to be shaking, believe me. And so you've got multiple points of contact. It's short as opposed to a shotgun. If you come around a corner, there's less chance it's going to be snatched from you. And you can aim a lot better. The sound is a lot lower because you've got all that barrel. You could even put, like I have on most of them, a flash suppressor that will deaden the sound also, and deaden that flash, which can kind of temporarily blind you. And
I've got my Ruger 1022 carbine.
You've got
a little banana clip in that. I've got more than enough to make sure my house.
And
is fine.
yeah, and I do want to mention that people kind of scoff sometimes at 22s, and 90% of the time, 22 now is a 22 long rifle. They're really about probably 15 different types of 22 rounds, but used to have 22 shorts and 22 longs, 22 long rifles. 22 Magnum's a great round. It's kind of expensive now, hard to find, but 22 long rifle has killed more people than probably any other civilian weapon. And I'm excluding people killed in battle. Of course, that's because there are more of them out there than anything else. It's like aspirin has killed more people than any other type drug. It's because more people take aspirin than any other type drug. But if you're in the slightest frightened about a firearm, the best firearm is the one you're going to use. Get a .22 rifle, and you can get a Ruger 1022. They're a great gun. They have a number of carbines that look like AR-15s, but they shoot 22 longs. M&P makes one, Beretta makes one, everybody makes one. But the only thing I would tell you on the AR type carbines is use the ammunition. It's called the Mini Mag. It's still a 22 long rifle. Mini Mag by CCI. They just have a little more oomph in them, so your carbine or your pistol, semi-auto pistol, will reload. 22s are notorious on semi-autos for not cycling properly because they kind of have a low charge in them. And in a self-defense gun, you're not out there shooting it all day, so it's maybe a third more expensive than your regular 22s. So buy it, and you want to make sure you can buy it with a little hollow points in there, soft lead, and believe me, you start firing at somebody with that, you're either going to kill them or they're going to leave their shoes in your house.
So following up, going off of your comment on using carbines, we were asked, are they better than a home defense shotgun with a 18.5-inch barrel?
Yes. Let me give you some drawbacks. Number one, home defense shotgun with an 18-inch barrel and the stock is liable to be 10 inches longer than a carbine. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot. Then even a 20 gauge home defense shotgun, the recoil, depending on which shotgun shell you use, is going to be 8 to 10 times more than depending on what carbine we talked about, but say a 22 or a 9mm or a M1 carbine. That's a lot of recoil. A 12 gauge may be 25 to 30 times more recoil. That, for somebody who's petite, that's something they're liable to drop after they fire the first round. Okay, let's talk about pumps, the disadvantages of a pump shotgun. Number one, most people leave a pump shotgun in the readiness state that they don't have a round in the chamber. There are all kinds of reasons they think that's safer, and it may be if they're children there or whatever. You wake up out of a dead sleep because there's a noise in the house. There's so many things that can go wrong to try to rack the slide and put a round in the chamber. You can short stroke it. You can, there's just lots of things that can go wrong. And one reason a lot of people like to rack around in the chamber is they think it frightens a criminal away. These criminals fight each other all day. They've got scars all over them. That's not going to scare them off. He'll know you've got a loaded gun when there are 8 or 9 pellets coming at him at 1,200 feet per second. So don't let him know where you are. And that's all racking a shotgun is giving your position away. He may be in a location where he opens fire when you rack a shotgun. So don't do that. But lots can go wrong unless you practice a lot racking a shotgun. Plus, when you rack one, you're taking one out of your magazine and putting it in your chamber. You're decreasing your ammunition supply by 1. And if you've got 5 shells in there originally, now you've still got a total of 5, but you would have had 6 if you had one in the chamber. So you fire that shotgun, its decibel level compared to let's say a 9mm carbine is probably 4 or 5 times higher in decibels. You're going to be instantly deaf. Not permanently, but if you've ever been hunting, what it does. The light that comes out of there, the same thing. And you still have to aim because the pattern at, let's give it 15 feet, because the few stretches in people's houses, let's give it 18 feet because I've done that measurement. 18 feet, the pattern's going to be like this. So you got to aim a shotgun. You can't just point it in the general direction and fire. You still got to aim a shotgun. And with a carbine, let's say I've got one that's it's called the Beretta Storm carbine. It's 9mm. It takes the same magazine as my Beretta M9 pistol. So that's 30 round magazine of 9mm. I've got 30 rounds as opposed to maybe, could be 4 to 8 for a home defense shotgun. So your round count is way up. It's a Southern thing. I get it because I did it for years. Let's go to if I was going to have a home defense shotgun, I mean, I've got them, but they're not the guns that are around me.
What did you first reach for? What is your
my gun of choice is called an IWI Tavor, Tavor. It's a little over the top, and it is an Israeli developed bullpup that the Israeli army uses now. It is the shortest gun legally that you can have without getting the stamp from the feds, 28 inches long, because the barrel's inside of it. It's 18-inch long barrel, but overall it's 28 inches long. It takes the same magazines that a M16 or an AR-15 takes, but it's all compact like that. And I've got, of course, one magazine in it, 30 rounds. I've got attached to it with the mag link, another 30 round magazine. And then I've got the laser, green laser on there. And then I've got a light too. And let me tell you, that will do a number. Even though that carbine is short, you can still take targets at 250 yards with it. But one thing is important, I'm glad you mentioned that, is that if you plan on using a carbine in your home and you have some type of sighting system, let's say an electronic sighting system, a red dot sight, you need to have it sighted for the distance you're probably going to be using it for in your home. Let's say 15 or 20 feet. Don't have it sighted, range sighted for 100 meters, because that's going to throw it off quite a bit. It wouldn't kill you if you had it sighted at 25 feet, but if you've got it sighted at 100 or 200 meters, it's going to be off considerably when it comes time to pull the trigger. And Chase had that kind of look. Yeah, there, that thing right there. One thing that'll really help you sighting, and I thought all this kind of stuff was silly. This is a laser sighter, laser bore sighter, and I don't know, $39 or something. A number of people sell these. You put it in the muzzle end of your gun for pistols and rifles, not for shotguns, because you work on that. But it emits, if I'm lucky to get it on, I want to hit the camera, but a red dot, and these plastic tips on the end come in different sizes. And you can put it into 22 caliber up to 45. And you put it pretty snug into, say, a pistol or rifle, and it will, the distance you were planning on shooting. Now, let's say if it's something, you can't do it at 100 yards, obviously. You got to kind of do the math at 25. Now, the most basic way to do it, you kind of get a reflective sight that comes with it, this really tin or kind of paper, and you'll put it at something fairly close, let's say 10 yards. You'll fire, and if the hole of the bullet is off from the dot a certain number of inches, then you make your sight adjustment. It's a lot easier. That easiest way to do it, if you've got an electronic sight, is you adjust your let's say your holographic sight to meet the red dot, this one should be accurate. Then you're going to get it pretty close. But you always want to test fire it with live rounds. But take this out first. I've seen this ejected when people have fired. They're not really expensive, but I've always thought, God, isn't there some potential for getting hurt with that? But they really help. I'll tell you that, because otherwise you're doing shoot, adjust, a dozen times. And if it's nice weather, that's fine. But if it's hot, like it normally is, it really gets tough. But yeah, short carbine. Ironically, people will say, "Gosh, you're firing a gun that shoots 5.56 millimeter or 223s, AR-15 in your house. You're going to kill your neighbor." That's actually safer than a 9mm pistol, because they're made to tumble end over end anytime they hit something hard. That's just, they're made to do that, kind of, because when they hit a breastbone or something like that, they'll wind up coming out your toe. A 9mm is not made to do that. It's made to keep going straight. If you have a self-defense round, it's made to flatten out. A lot of that's kind of overblown, but a 9mm full metal jacket, it'll go straight through the wall. Unless you've got bricks on the outside of your house, it'll go straight through the wall and it'll go into the neighbor's house. There's nothing stopping it. So a 9mm full metal jacket compared to a 223 full metal jacket, the 9mm will kill your neighbor. 223 won't.
Well, we're hitting a little bit past 8 o'clock, so.
Well, listen, we'll do this. The plan will be in 2 weeks, and we will get with all y'all about time. We're going to do it at this same time. So same time, same channel next time. Won't be same channel. We'll send you the link. Take care.